back. This is What If Deku Was Shirou Emiya, Part 7. Can't believe I actually made it to Part 7, but you guys have been loving the series so much that, I'm going to keep on going. And, if you could, comment down below what you think of the new intro. Made it just a little bit before the recording of this video. But anyways, that's enough of this. Let's get on into the conclusion of the sports festival. So, basically, where we last left off, Deku's team, which was Deku, Ida, and Hatsumi, they won first place, and I said everybody else basically placed in the same ways that they would have. And I'm going to say the people that didn't place were almost all the support course people except for Shinzo, obviously. Most of class 1B. And I'm going to say, everyone from class 1A didn't qualify except for Uraraka, Tokoyami, Momo, Denki, Kirishima, Bakugo, Todoroki. So, basically, and Ida, Ida, Deku, they also qualify, obviously. But that's about it. The rest of them did not qualify. And, the fights are going to start off. But I'm going to say that Deku, he walks up to Hatsumi and he tells her she should basically just forfeit. He's like, with the win here, you've shown off your gadgets enough. You should just forfeit your match. And she's like, but why? And he says, basically, so I don't have to waste this guy's stamina right here, because I'd like to fight him uninterrupted. And he says, and I want him at his best, so it'd probably be better if you just forfeited anyway. And if you do, I'll owe you a favor. A personal favor that you can call anytime. And Hatsumi says that's a deal. And she walks over to Midnight saying that she will forfeit her round. And she's looking at Deku and she's like, alright, I just got done forfeiting. You better keep your word. And Deku's like, I'm a man of my word, if nothing else. And she walks off. And Ida's like, why did you do that? And he's like I said, I want to fight you at your best. There was a deal to be made, and I made it. He's like, you don't even know what she will have you do. And he's like, well, I didn't say that I do anything she asked. I just said that she could call in a favor at any time. I never said that I'd accept the terms of the favor. And Ida's like, you manipulated her. And he's like, no. If it's within reason, I'll surely do the favor. But if it's anything that would jeopardize my morals, I simply won't do it. And, he's like, well, at least you have some honor. Deku laughs and he's like, what are you talking about? I always have honor. And, so they end up walking off. They go to the rooms to wait, and, they're going through the matchups. And I'm going to say, Kirishima versus Tetsu, it goes similar, but not all the way. I'm going to say that Kirishima, seeing how Deku's quirkless, but always exceeding well past what he is, even with his quirk, it drives him to train harder, and through that, it led to him being able to hold his quirk for longer. And so, when they're getting down to the last wire, Kirishima blocks Tetsu's punch and counterattacks with a right hook straight to the temple, knocking out Tetsu. So Kirishima wins. There's no tiebreaker, none of that. And Monoma sees that and he's just like, hey, Tetsu, how could you lose to that Class 1A trash? And Kirishima looks up and he's just like, hey, who are you calling trash? You lost just as well. You didn't even make it to this round. And Mona, he's just like, oh, look, you're attacking someone else. Ugh. Deku, he sees that shit and he's like, man, what the hell is wrong with that guy? And he just like, that guy. And then Kendo walks up behind him and just bitch slaps him. She just bitch slaps the hell out of him. And so, that's the first match done. I'm gonna say, basically, Deku's fight with Shinzo's up next. And Deku's going into it, and, he listens to Ojiro, tail guy. That is his name. But, he tells him that his quirk has something to do with, his mouth. And he asks you a question and you answer it. You kind of lose control of your own body. And Deku's like, oh, is that so? And he's like, yeah. He's like, well, that won't have any effect on me. And, Ojiro's like, what? He's like, oh, don't worry, you'll see. And so, Deku, he's walking to the ring. And, as soon as he's coming down, he sees Archer there waiting for him. And he's like, what are you doing down here, Archer? After all, I thought you were supposed to be in your seat. He's like, I snuck off to try and give you some advice last minute. And, he's like, oh, what advice is that? Archer tells him, don't pull your punches. And Deku looks at Archer like, what? And he's like, think about it. If you pull your punches, you're really just gonna hurt that guy's pride. It's best to let him know the difference in ability right off the bat, so that way he'll at least know what the gap is. And he'll know if he wants to continue or not. Never give anyone false hope. That's just unbecoming of you. And Deku, he's just like, alright. And he's like, so what, you want me to whip out unlimited blade works and just go all crazy? He's like, no. Don't use any of your magic. He's like, definitely don't pull out a sword out of nowhere. And he's just like, just beat him to a pulp. And throw him out. Just like the trash he is. And Deku looks at Archer and he's just like, he's trash? And he's like, well, the way he is now is. After all, isn't he blaming everything on people who have more flashier quirks as the reason why he's not getting ahead? And Deku's like, you're right. And he's just like, so, you being quirkless, beating him to a pulp, someone who has a quirk, shouldn't that be, a wake-up call that even if you don't have a quirk, you can rival someone who does? After all, you've demonstrated that well enough today. And, so, Deku, he's like, alright, fine, I won't go easy on him. He's like, but don't blame me if he ends up in the hospital. And Archer laughs and he says, oh, trust me, I won't blame you. Not one bit. But remember not to go too overboard. Your girlfriend and little sister are watching. He's like, little sister? And Archer's like, little in stature, not in age. And Deku laughs. And he walks off. And Archer, he just sort of turns himself invisible and walks back around there. makes sure no one's looking, turns visible, and acts like he's coming from the bathroom. And he sits down by Ren, and Ren asks him, "So where were you off to, Archer?" And Archer just tells her, "To the bathroom, of course. Didn't I come that way?" And Ren, she's just like, And Ilya's like, "So how is Deku?" And, Archer's just like, "He'll be fine. After all, he did promise us he'd win." And, they're just like, "Yeah, you're right." So Deku's walking into the arena, and he's just waiting on Shinso. And Shinso gets there, and before Shinso can even ask a question, Deku's like, "I won't be holding back on you, right?" And Shinso's caught off guard, but Deku's not done talking. He's like, "I'm not going to hold back against you. I'm not going to pull my punches. And as soon as the fight starts, I'm not going to talk to you. I won't answer anything you say. All I'm going to do is beat you. How much of a beating you take, well, that's up to you. If you say you surrender, I'll stop. Don't surrender, I'll beat you until you're out of the ring." And, Shinzo's looking shocked, and Deku's like, "Well, that's all I have to say. After the fight, I'll tell you more about why I did it." And he shuts up, and he's dropped into his fighting stance. And, as soon as Midnight says, "Fight," Deku's just rushes Shinzo. He hits him with a full force punch to the gut, just gassing him. And Shinzo can barely even breathe at this point. Deku kicks him right in the knee, pushing back, breaking Shinzo's leg immediately on impact. Because Deku is very physically strong, even without strengthening his body. And, extremely physically strong. Because unlike Shirou in the main, and unlike Deku in the main universes, this Deku was trained in magecraft and hand-to-hand combat every day from elementary school all the way up through high school to where he's at now. And so he's had a lot of time to gain strength and muscle mass. He's not near Archer's level, but he's not as scrawny as, Shirou or Deku is in canon. He's a nice middle ground. So, yeah, and especially since Shinzo was not even flexing and had his legs in such awkward positions, because Shinzo's not a fighter. He doesn't know the proper way to fight, so he's not going to have his knees bent. They're straight, and when you kick a knee that's straight with enough force to push it back, it's going to break pretty easily, in fact. And that's what Deku does, and he puts a lot of force behind it. And Shinzo screams out in pain, and he's about to drop to the floor. Before he can, Deku just knees him right in the chin. He grabs him and then he throws him. And when he throws him, he throws Shinzo. Shinzo's out of bounds and back hits the wall. And he's on the ground. And Midnights declares Deku the winner. And everyone is shocked at just how brutal Deku beat this man. And he walks over to Shinzo and he's like, "Sorry I had to go rough on you, but you needed a wake-up call. You say you're not where you're at because of other people with their amazing quirks. Truth is, you just never put in the effort. I'm quirkless and I just beat your sorry ass. So maybe you should quit blaming others and start actually feeling for yourself and training yourself up to be better." And he walks off. And that's one fight for Deku down. And now that that's out of the way, it is supposed to be Ida's match, but Midnight announces that Ida's opponent forfeits. And that Ida will move on to the next round. And, you know, the Tokoyami versus fucking Momo fight, it goes like in canon. And, you know, since Shirou didn't pass in this, what if Todoroki's opponent, let's see. I'm gonna just say, you know, it's a random one-base student. It ends the same way, no matter who he's really against. It ends the same way. So, you know, everyone is just shocked at how powerful Todoroki is. And Deku, he's just looking like, well, isn't that a bit cold? And Ida's right there beside him, and he's just like, really? A freeze pun? Now? And Deku's like, what, not a fan? So, Ida's like, you're something else, you know that? He's like, I know. Because they're up in the stands, but Deku and Ida, they're off on their own, you know. They're not sitting with the rest of their class, which the class doesn't notice. Next up is Bakugo versus Uraraka. And that fight goes exactly like in canon. Bakugo wins. And, you know, Deku actually congratulates Bakugo on his win this time. And people are just like, what? How can you congratulate him on winning against Uraraka like that? And he's just like, look, he didn't hold back. She should feel grateful he didn't hold back, so she knows what the power difference is. That way, she can determine if she really wants to keep going on this or if she just wants to give up. Knowing the truth is a lot better than trying to guess at a lie. And he's like, Todoroki did the same thing to his opponent, showed them the difference in power. But I can't really congratulate him on that. And Todoroki hears this and he's just like, oh, what's so different? Deku tells him, you only used half your power. And Todoroki, he's just like, what'd you say? And Deku says, you're only using half your strength. What, you think you're better than everybody? You think you can win against us all just by using your ice side? Let me see those flames. Are they even anywhere near as strong? And Todoroki, he's getting more and more pissed. And Deku, he's like, oh, don't worry. You won't have to wait long to get your ass kicked. After all, our fight's up next. And, you know, Todoroki's like, what? He's like, this whole time we've been talking, they've been running through matches after matches. So, we're just about up. So hold on to that anger, big guy. After all, you're gonna get your ass kicked properly. And, you know, Deku, he walks off. And Ida's just like, oh, what was that about? And Deku's just like getting him fired up. And Ida's like, was that another pun? And Deku's like, no, actually that one was not intended. And so, you know, he's walking off. And Todoroki, he is pissed beyond belief. And everyone sees it in his face. Todoroki looks like he's ready to kill Deku. And Todoroki's basically determined he's gonna kill him. Like, not seriously kill him, but, like, immediately destroy him with ice just as soon as the match has started. That's his plan, anyway. But, Ida's just like, well, I have my match against that, girl with the vines for hair. And Deku's just like, oh, well, that should be an easy win for you. And Ida's like, what do you mean? I was like, well, her attacks have to come from the ground or right at you. You're fast enough to avoid either of them and just, take her by the clothes and throw her out, dude. Like, it's that simple. And Ida, he's like, well, alright. So Ida goes out for his match. And he does exactly what Deku said. Like, as soon as the match starts, Ida uses Reciprocal Burst, grabs her, and throws her with a spin. And out of bounds she went. And that got a lot of people's attention for Ida, because he won so swiftly using his quirk efficiently and strategically. And Ida's like, well, I won my match. Your turn to go win yours. And this is when Deku versus Todoroki starts. And, Todoroki, he's thinking he's going to get to the ring first, but no, it's Deku because, Deku, Archer, and Rin, and Ilya can sense it. Deku's using Kiritsugu's acceleration. And he's using it before the fights even began. And nobody can notice. And he gets into the ring and, everyone just assumes he's energetic, that's all. And, Deku, he did take the time to learn, Kirei Kotomine's fighting style. Even though it's not the best fit for him, he does think it could be effective in this type of situation. So, even though he's not mastered it, he is somewhat pretty good at it. And Deku, he's forming, like, these nodes in his hands. And people are just like, whoa, 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 what is that? And Deku, he's just like, oh, don't worry. It's part of my abilities. And Todoroki hears that, he's just like, what abilities? Deku's like, don't worry about it. The right people know. And Midnight's about to disqualify Deku, but then she gets a call from, Nezu. And Nezu says, oh no, it's quite alright. I've okayed his situation. I know it. He is indeed quirkless, but he does have other abilities, but you don't need to worry about those. I know, and that's enough. And, she's like, it's allowed, and everyone is shocked. Like, what? He's allowed to use weapons? And, Midnight basically says the principal has allowed it, saying that, even though he is quirkless, he does have other abilities to create things, apparently. So she's like, I don't understand it either, but all I know is it's allowed, so we're going to allow it. And basically, what's happened behind the scenes is, as soon as Deku got into, UA, the clock tower contacted his principal, Nezu, and, informed them of what Deku is, and that it should be remained a secret in case there were any moles inside of there connected to the mages that are less than desirable. So that's the whole point of Deku hiding the fact that he's a mage. It's not that they wanted him to just not tell anybody, because they think that if a mage could become the number one, hero that it could bring a lot of positivity to Magecraft. And people wouldn't just use the quirks. But they're not really about to just go out there and start recruiting people. So Deku, he's just like, besides, you have to have a certain aptitude for Magecraft anyway. You just can't have magic circuits implanted and be great. Deku, he already had that ineptitude because of what Kirei did with him. Well, not Kirei, Kiritsugu. Wrong person. So, Deku, he's pretty much ready, and, he doesn't have the blades out, but Todoroki can pretty much tell he's planning on using those. And Tosaka sees the black keys, and she's just like, is he gonna fight like the priest? And Archer's like, apparently, this should be interesting. Let's see how it does. And so, he's basically just like, let's see what he does with them. Midnight starts the fight. Todoroki immediately tries to go for the freezing aspect, but Deku's acceleration, he throws them, and they hit Todoroki right in the arm, like a second after, and the blade is out and it pierces right through him. And stabs into him, and he's just like, he notices that it's blades, like, he's literally been stabbed. And he's like, what the hell? But then he notices Deku's right there, up close, and punches Todoroki straight under the chin, like, straight up uppercut. And Todoroki's head is shook. Like, he can't comprehend the ass beating that he is getting. And not even thinking about it, he shoots fire straight at Deku. Deku dodges. Because he can perceive time faster and move faster. But it's only his perception of time. Like, his own time space. It doesn't affect everything around him. And so, Deku notices that the more he's starting to use his magic, the more it's starting to feel different to him somehow. And Archer can tell pretty soon the side effects of him knowing all the experience of his future self is going to start taking its toll. And he's telling Tosaka, he'll become more and more like me every day. And he says, not just magically, but appearance-wise as well. And she's just like, what? And basically, how Deku looks in this is kind of like, he still has his green hair and green eyes, but he sort of has like the Shirou Emiya type of body and jawline, but still the freckles on his face that Deku kind of has. So, yeah, it's like if you mix Deku and Shirou Emiya together. But more and more, like, they can tell that Deku's starting to change and is starting to look more and more like Archer every day. And not just in his magic, but in his fighting style, how he thinks, and how he acts. And Deku goes straight for it, and, Midnight's about to stop the match because of Todoroki's stab wound. But Deku ends the fight pretty simply with a leg sweep to knock Todoroki off balance. And then, right before he hits the ground, Deku just straight up kicks him with as much force as he can muster, even strengthening his body. And what happens is he ends up breaking 3 of Todoroki's ribs because he hits him in the rib cage. And it does end up, like, puncturing a lung at the same time. And Todoroki is out. Like, he's out cold. So they call a stretcher and get him immediately up to Recovery Girl. And Deku is warned that he's going to be disqualified if he stabs another student. And at this point, like, everyone is pretty scared of Deku now. That they know he can just summon deadly objects at will. Even Ida is, like, pretty shocked by this. And that's when, Deku, he's walking up there and Ida's waiting on him. And he's like, you need to explain to me exactly what your powers are. And Deku's like, I told you I'm quirkless. And he's like, well then tell me what abilities you do have. Because you're not just a normal human. And Deku tells him, well, I've known you long enough, so I guess I can trust you. He's like, if you would have had any actual contact with a mage family, you would have already known what that was. And, he just like, mage? And Deku's like, yeah, I'm a mage. I use magic. And he's like, what? He's like, yeah, I use magic. My type of magic is projection and strengthening magic. By knowing how the internal components are inside any object, I can create an exact replica, strengthen it into a projection, strengthen that projection, and turn it into a real object. And Ida is shocked, and he's like, so you can just summon a sword at any moment? He's like, not just swords. A bow, arrows, spears. Basically, he says, just simply, he's like, I can't copy a gun, though. That's a bit too complex for me. And definitely not my style anyway. And he's like, I do have other abilities that go with it, but that's pretty much the gist of it. He's like, oh, and I can also use, some sort of time manipulation magic as well. He's like, what? He's like, I can manipulate my own, perception of time. I can speed it up, which allows me to move faster, perceive things slower, and allows me to make snap decisions that could save my life. And Ida is shocked hearing all this. And he's like, look, I'm only going to tell you. I don't need you telling the rest of our class because I don't trust them enough to know. He's like, there's a lot of other mages out in the world. Some of them aren't so friendly. And don't like it when people use magic in public. So I probably made a lot of enemies today. After all, I'm certain my enemies are actually watching the sports festival anyway. So I wanted them to know I'm capable of taking them out. And Ida's like, taking them out? You mean killing them? And Deku's like, no. I won't kill them, but I will make sure they pay for their crimes. And Ida says, that's nothing more than being a vigilante. And Deku's like, why do you think I'm here? I'm learning how to be a hero and do things right. And he's like, but if someone is in need of help, I just can't look the other way. He's like, I will save as many people as I can. And he's telling him, I will be able to bear the consequences and sins of my actions. Because doing that act, saving them, that is my own free will. That is my own desire and my own ideals. So I can handle what happens to me after the fact. And he just like, alright, I understand. And, he's actually just kind of bummed out about it. But he's like, okay. And, Bakugo's ready for his match against, fucking Tokoyami. And Tokoyami forfeits. He's not really wanting to fight Bakugo. And so they realize it's a three-way tie. There's Ida, Deku, and Bakugo. And they're not sure how really to proceed with this. And Ida offers up a solution. Why don't him and Tokoyami fight and, reinstate Tokoyami and let him fight Ida and have Deku and Bakugo fight. And Bakugo likes that idea. He's like, that works for me. Deku, he goes along with it. And he's like, yeah, sure. And Midnight, she calls Nezu, and Nezu's like, that's an excellent idea. That way there's still 2 matches. And she's like, okay, but who should go first? And she's like, and Nezu, he thinks about it for a minute. He says, have Bakugo and Deku go first. And Bakugo and Deku, they're surprised to hear that, but they're both ready. And Midnight reminds Deku of his warning. He will be thrown out if he uses bladed objects again. And Deku, he's like, fine. Very well. And so Deku, he's like, you said just bladed objects, right? And she's like, yes. And he's like, okay, fair enough. And, Deku's all the way to where he's almost stepping out of the line. And Bakugo, he's ready. He's ready. He's just waiting on her to start. And so, she starts. Deku summons a bow. And Bakugo's just like, what? You gonna shoot rocks at me? Deku thinks for a minute while Bakugo's running at him. And he's like, you know what? That actually doesn't sound like a bad idea. So Deku kicks up a rock, and he pulls back his bow. Bakugo lunges at him with an explosion. Deku jumps right up above him, and he shoots the rock with as much force as he can muster, hitting Bakugo straight in the back. And it knocks Bakugo to the ground, and he's just like, what the hell? And Midnight's just like, oh, another weapon? And he's like, hey, it's not bladed. And she's just like, don't use weapons. And Deku's just like, oh, fine. So he uses acceleration and strengthening. And it's basically, before Bakugo can even look to see where Deku's at, Deku hits him right in the kidney. And Bakugo, he screams bloody murder from that because it hurts like hell. He throws an explosion. He's just going crazy with explosions. He's just not even looking where he's aiming. Which means he's really sloppy at the moment. And Deku is just loving it. And so he hits Bakugo straight up in the stomach, kicks his leg out from under him, takes his head, and slams it into the ground, knocking Bakugo out. And so that ends that fight. And so, Ida and Tokoyami's turn. And this is actually a really close fight because Tokoyami, he's using Dark Shadow, and Ida's running around trying to find an opening. But, he eventually gets to the point where he just uses Recipro Burst and kicks Tokoyami straight in the stomach sending him out of the ring. And Ida's exhausted. Like, he doesn't even think he can fight anymore. And so, Tokoyami loses. So now it's time to find the first and second place people. And so, Deku re-enters the ring, and Ida says he forfeits. And Midnight's like, huh? And Ida says, I'm too tired to fight. Like, I've reached my limits. My legs are killing me. And Deku accepts that. And he says, well fought. And Deku wins. And so, they get to the award ceremony, and, I'm going to say that since Tokoyami was originally forfeiting, they put Bakugo as the third place winner, Ida as second place, and Deku as first. And that's how the sports festival comes to an end. Deku, he's walking out of the stadium, and Endeavor is pissed. Like, after Deku gets done changing and he's back into his normal clothes, Endeavor confronts him in the hallway, and he's like, just what the hell are you? He's like, you have no right to be stabbing my son in the arm and injuring him in a way. You gave him a collapsed lung. And he's like, look, I don't want to hear from you, his own father, for giving him those issues in the first place that led to him getting his ass kicked in such a way. And Endeavor, he's about ready to throw down with Deku right now. And Archer, he was on his way to look for Deku anyway, and he sees this, and he basically tells Endeavor, aren't you a bit too old to be picking a fight with children? And, Endeavor, he looks at Archer, and he's like, oh, and who the hell are you? A foreigner? And Archer, he looks at him, and he says, what, are you racist or something? And Endeavor is like, what? He's like, no, you just look foreign, that's all. And Archer's like, no, I can assure you, I'm Japanese. But anyway, if you're looking for a fight, I'm more than happy to oblige you. He's like, but don't blame me when you end up in a hospital bed right by your son. And Endeavor is starting to heat up the place because he is pissed to hear that. And Archer's not backing down. He's cracking his knuckles, and then he summons his twin swords. And he's getting ready to fight. But just as soon as he does, I'm going to say that some other students are coming out and they're asking, what's going on here? Endeavor just scoffs. Archer quickly dissipates his weapons, and he's like, just a pro hero trying to throw his weight around and intimidate a kid. How sad. Such a false hero. Endeavor, he's still pissed, but he's not really about to make a scene with all these other kids around. So he just bails. And Deku, he looks at Archer and he's like, well, aren't you quick with the tongue? And Archer's like, he made it too easy. And, they head back to where Tosaka's at. Tosaka, she hugs Deku and she's like, what were you thinking, using your magecraft out there like that? And he says, oh, yeah. He's like, well, I had to bait them somehow. And And she's just like, what? Bait? Who? And he's nods to her, and she's like, oh, I understand now. Deku's like, I thought you would. And they head home. But that's where I'm going to leave it off for today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please give me a like. Comment down below what your thoughts were. If you have any opinions or recommendations, leave those down there as well. Subscribe if you're new. Share this video with your friends, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.